Lena Carter pulled her suitcase from the overhead rack, her grip tightening as she stepped onto the crowded platform. Her phone buzzed again, another urgent text from her best friend, reminding her she had only 20 minutes to reach the hotel. If she was late, she could forget about the job interview. Navigating through the chaos of Union Station, Lena wove between hurried travelers, dragging her suitcase behind her. The wheels rattled over the uneven flooring, but she paid no attention. She was too focused on getting a cab, so focused in fact that she completely missed the moment someone else grabbed a nearly identical black suitcase from the same spot as hers. It wasn't until she collapsed into the back seat of a taxi, breathless, that something felt wrong. The suitcase on her lap felt heavier than she remembered. A strange sense of unease crept up her spine as she unzipped it slightly. The moment she caught sight of what was inside, her stomach dropped. This wasn't her bag. Gone were her secondhand blazer and resume folder. In their place, perfectly pressed dress shirts, a sleek silver watch in a velvet box, and was that stacks of $100 bills? Her pulse kicked up. Who the hell carries this much cash in a suitcase? Her fingers scrambled for any form of identification. And then she saw it. An expensive-looking leather tag, embossed with a name, Nathaniel King. Lena didn't know who that was, but judging by the contents of the bag, he wasn't just some ordinary traveler. She let out a long, exhausted sigh, pressing her head against the taxi seat. Of course, just my luck. There was no time to turn back. Her interview was in 10 minutes, and she had already wasted too much time. She'd have to deal with this later, and just hope that Nathaniel King wasn't calling the police already. What she didn't know was that the owner of the suitcase was already on a mission to track her down. Nathaniel King was seething. His assistant, Owen Pierce, hovered beside him, looking uneasy. "Sir, we're reviewing the security footage from the station. We'll identify whoever took your suitcase." Nathaniel dragged a hand over his face. The cash and clothes didn't concern him. Those were replaceable, but inside that suitcase was a folder containing confidential multi-million-dollar contracts. If those documents ended up in the wrong hands, the consequences would be disastrous. His sharp green eyes scanned the station, his frustration mounting. Find them, now. Meanwhile, Lena's interview was going horribly. She stumbled over her answers, her mind too preoccupied with the suitcase full of cash sitting next to her. The interviewer's skeptical expression only made things worse. By the time she walked out of the office, she knew, without a doubt, she wasn't getting the job. Sighing in defeat, she pulled out her phone. She needed to find Nathaniel King before this turned into an even bigger mess. A quick search of his name made her freeze. Nathaniel King wasn't just some businessman. He was one of the youngest self-made millionaires in the country. The gash CEO of a powerful investment firm, frequently in the headlines for groundbreaking deals, and apparently for being ridiculously good-looking. And now she was in possession of his very expensive-looking suitcase. Lena exhaled sharply, closing her eyes for a moment. She had to fix this, fast. Nathaniel's phone buzzed. "We found her," Owen said. "She's at a cafe a few blocks from the station." Nathaniel didn't wait for more details. He grabbed his coat and strode out the door. Lena sat at a small cafe, her fingers curled tightly around a steaming cup of coffee. She was still trying to wrap her head around everything when a shadow fell across her table. She looked up and forgot how to breathe. Nathaniel King stood before her, his sharp suit flawless even in the dim lighting, his presence commanding the entire space without a word. His gaze, cold and unreadable, locked onto her like a predator sizing up its prey. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, without breaking eye contact, he slid into the chair across from her. "You have something that belongs to me." Lena's stomach twisted. I didn't mean to take it," she stammered. "It was a mistake, I swear." Nathaniel arched an eyebrow, unimpressed. "And yet, you didn't return it right away." "I was going to," she protested. I had an interview, and then I was trying to figure out how to contact you." Her voice trailed off, sounding weak even to her own ears. He studied her, silent and calculating. Then, to her surprise, the corner of his mouth twitched. "You're lucky I found you first." His voice was smooth but carried an edge of something dangerous. "Do you have any idea what was in that suitcase?" Lena swallowed. Stacks of cash, expensive clothes. His expression hardened. More than that, he said. Documents, very important ones. Her stomach dropped. Oh? Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, arms crossed as he watched her. And now, I find myself wondering, who exactly are you? Lena's eyes widened. How do you know my name? He smirked. I have my ways. Her pulse raced. Everything about him was intimidating, from the sharpness in his gaze to the sheer authority in his posture. And yet, something in the way he looked at her made her breath hitch. She had no idea that this one mistake would change her life forever. Lena gripped the edge of the table, her heart hammering. Nathaniel King was even more intense in person than he appeared in the articles she had skimmed. His sharp green eyes assessed her, cool and calculating, the look of a man who could ruin someone's life with a single phone call. She swallowed. Look, I didn't go through anything. I swear, I just... Nathaniel lifted a hand, silencing her effortlessly. And yet you had my suitcase for hours, he said. His tone was even, but beneath it was an unmistakable threat. That's a long time to hold on to something that doesn't belong to you. Lena bristled. Are you seriously accusing me of stealing it? She shot back. It was an accident. I grabbed the wrong bag in the chaos of the station. The moment I realized it, I was trying to figure out how to return it. Nathaniel leaned forward slightly, his piercing gaze never wavering. You expect me to believe that? Frustration bubbled up inside her. Why would I steal a suitcase full of men's clothes? She snapped. I mean, sure, the cash was tempting. His expression darkened. She threw up her hands. I'm kidding. I didn't take anything. Your precious documents are all still inside. I swear. For a long moment, Nathaniel said nothing. He just watched her, his gaze sharp and unreadable, as if peeling back her layers to see what was underneath. Then, without breaking eye contact, he reached down and pulled the suitcase from beside her chair. Lena stiffened as he unzipped it, rifling through its contents with meticulous precision. He checked every pocket, flipped through the thick folder of papers she hadn't dared to touch. His jaw tightened slightly as he scanned the documents, his face betraying nothing. Finally, he snapped the suitcase shut and exhaled through his nose. Everything's here. Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. See, I told you. Nathaniel's gaze flicked back to her, sharp as a blade. You have no idea how lucky you are. She scoffed, crossing her arms. Lucky? Lena let out a dry laugh, crossing her arms. Oh yeah, so lucky. I just bombed an interview for a job I desperately needed because I was too busy freaking out over this whole situation. But please, tell me again how fortunate I am. For a second, something flickered across Nathaniel's expression. Surprise, maybe. Then, to her complete confusion, the corner of his mouth twitched. You're bold, he remarked. She narrowed her eyes. I'm honest. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, considering her. What was the interview for? Lena hesitated. A personal assistant position at a marketing firm. She let out a humorless chuckle. Not that it matters now. Pretty sure I made a complete fool of myself in there. Nathaniel tapped his fingers against the table, his gaze unreadable. You need a job, she frowned. Obviously. For a long moment, he studied her in silence. Then, as if reaching a decision, he slipped a hand into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a sleek black business card. Without a word, he placed it on the table between them. Come to my office tomorrow morning, he said. I might have an opportunity for you. Lena blinked. Excuse me? Nathaniel stood, adjusting the cuffs of his jacket. You're resourceful, he said simply, and you don't scare easily. His lips quirked slightly. I could use someone like that. She stared at him, completely thrown. You don't even know me. He smirked. I know enough, and I trust my instincts. Lena glanced down at the business card. His name was printed in crisp silver lettering alongside an address in the heart of Chicago's financial district. By the time she looked back up, he was already walking away. She exhaled sharply, still dazed. What the hell just happened? The next morning, Lena stood in front of a towering skyscraper, gripping Nathaniel's business card so tightly it crumpled in her palm. She had spent all night debating whether this was an absolutely terrible idea. What did she really know about Nathaniel King, other than the fact that he was wealthy, powerful, and had a stare sharp enough to cut glass? And yet, here she was. Taking a steadying breath, she stepped inside. The lobby was sleek, modern, and so pristine, it made her feel instantly out of place. She approached the reception desk and cleared her throat. "Hi. I have a meeting with Nathaniel King." The receptionist barely glanced at her before pressing a button on her headset. "Mr. King is expecting you. Take the elevator to the top floor." Of course, he had the top floor. As she stepped into the elevator, her own reflection stared back at her from the mirrored walls. Her outfit, an old blazer, a blouse that had seen better days, suddenly felt wildly inadequate. Before she had time to dwell on it, the elevator doors slid open, revealing an office that looked more like something out of a high-stakes business drama than real life. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a breathtaking view of the Chicago skyline. The entire space exuded power and control, just like the man standing behind a massive desk, dressed in another flawlessly tailored suit. Nathaniel looked up as she entered. His expression gave nothing away. "You came." Lena folded her arms, still not sure why. A flicker of amusement passed through his gaze as he gestured toward the chair across from him. She hesitated before lowering herself into the plush leather seat. Nathaniel leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "I'll be direct," he said. "I need a personal assistant. My last one quit unexpectedly, and I don't have time for a long hiring process." Lena blinked. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you an opportunity," he corrected smoothly. "It won't be easy. My schedule is demanding, and I expect efficiency. But the pay is generous." She hesitated. "Why me?" His smirk deepened. "Because you've already proven you can handle pressure." Lena chewed her lip, her mind racing. This was insane. She had zero experience working for someone like Nathaniel King. And yet, she thought about her dwindling savings, the stack of unpaid bills waiting for her at home. She exhaled. "Fine, when do I start?" Nathaniel's smirk widened. "Now." Lena barely had time to process before her new life began. Before Lena could fully process what was happening, Nathaniel stood, grabbing his coat. "We have a meeting across town," he said, already heading for the door. "Keep up." And just like that, her life changed forever. Lena barely had time to snatch her bag before Nathaniel strode out of the office, his long strides forcing her to scramble after him. The second they stepped into the private elevator together, the air shifted, charged with an intensity she couldn't quite define. It felt like she had just been pulled into a world that moved at an entirely different speed, a world she had no idea how to navigate. Nathaniel glanced at his watch as the elevator descended. "We're already behind schedule. The driver is waiting outside." Lena tried to keep up. "Where exactly are we going?" "A meeting with potential investors," he said smoothly. "I hope you're good at taking notes." She shot him a look. "I wasn't exactly given a training manual." His lips curved slightly, something glinting in his gaze. "Consider this your initiation." The elevator doors slid open, and before she knew it, she was climbing into the back seat of a sleek black sedan. The driver gave Nathaniel a small nod before pulling into traffic, weaving effortlessly through the streets of downtown Chicago. Lena pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. "Okay," she said, trying to sound more composed than she felt. "What exactly do I need to know?" Nathaniel studied her for a beat, like he was testing her, before launching into an explanation of the deal they were heading into. As he spoke, Lena's fingers flew over the screen, trying to capture every key detail. The more he revealed, the more she realized just how high the stakes were. This wasn't some basic business meeting. This was a multi-million-dollar acquisition. If the deal collapsed, it wouldn't just cost Nathaniel money. It could shift the entire playing field for his company. And somehow, she was now a part of it. By the time they arrived at the towering glass skyscraper, Lena's head was spinning. She followed Nathaniel into the building, heart pounding as they stepped into a conference room filled with powerful, sharp-dressed executives. The moment Nathaniel walked in, his entire presence shifted. He wasn't just confident. He was magnetic. It was as if the entire room subtly bent to his presence, his authority demanding attention without him having to say a word. Lena slid into the seat beside him, clutching her phone as the meeting began. She watched, equal parts fascinated and intimidated, as Nathaniel effortlessly handled the conversation, deflecting concerns, countering objections, redirecting discussions with razor-sharp precision. It was like watching a master strategist at work. At one point, an older investor leaned back in his chair, skepticism clear in his expression. "You're asking for a lot of trust, King." Nathaniel didn't even blink. "Trust is built on results," he said smoothly, "and my results speak for themselves." Silence. Then, slowly, the investor nodded. Lena held her breath as the contracts were passed around. Nathaniel signed his name with a decisive flourish, sealing the deal. She exhaled, only now realizing just how tense she had been. As they stepped out of the building, Nathaniel glanced at her. "Not bad for your first day." Lena let out a breathless laugh, shaking her head. "If this is the pace you work at, I might not survive the week." Nathaniel smirked. "Then you'll have to adapt." Something about the way he said it sent a shiver down her spine. Back at the office, Lena barely had time to process everything before Nathaniel handed her a stack of files. "Organize these. I need summaries by the end of the day." She sighed but got to work. Hours passed in a blur of documents, emails, and back-to-back phone calls. Just when she thought she was finally catching up, another pile of work landed on her desk. It was exhausting, but somehow also exhilarating. By the time the office had emptied out, Lena leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. She hadn't even realized Nathaniel was standing in the doorway until he cleared his throat. "You're still here." She blinked, startled. "So are you." He chuckled, stepping inside. "I don't leave until the work is done." Lena let out a tired breath, managing a small, weary smile. "Then I guess I'm in trouble." Nathaniel studied her for a moment. Then, to her complete surprise, he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "Come on," he said, pouring a drink. "You survived your first day. That deserves a celebration." Lena hesitated before taking the glass he offered. She took a cautious sip, the warmth spreading through her chest, the exhaustion of the day settling into her bones. Nathaniel leaned against his desk, watching her with an unreadable expression. "You handled yourself well today." She scoffed. "Barely." His lips twitched. "You kept up. That's more than I can say for most." Lena glanced at him, really looked at him. For all his confidence, there was something else beneath it, something guarded, as if he carried a weight too heavy for one person to bear. Before she could stop herself, she asked, "Do you ever slow down?" His expression flickered, just for a second, then he tipped his glass toward her. "Not in this business." Lena wasn't sure why, but something about that answer made her chest tighten. They sat there in silence for a while, the glow of the city lights stretching across the office windows. For the first time since she'd met him, Nathaniel King didn't feel quite so untouchable. And that terrified her more than anything. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of late nights, high-stakes meetings, and an unspoken tension that neither Lena nor Nathaniel dared to acknowledge. She adapted faster than she expected, learning how he liked his schedules arranged, how he took his coffee, and how to anticipate his next move before he even asked. The deeper she stepped into his world, the more she realized just how much pressure he was under. Deals worth hundreds of millions depended on his decisions. Competitors circled like vultures, waiting for any sign of weakness. His reputation, built ruthlessly over the years, could crumble with a single mistake. But what she hadn't expected, what she hadn't even seen coming, was how much she was starting to feel drawn to him. It was in the way his voice softened when he gave her an unexpected compliment, the way his gaze lingered on her a second too long during late-night strategy sessions, the stolen glances, the brief touches that sent sparks down her spine, the way her pulse quickened whenever he walked into the room. And then, just when she thought she could keep things professional, everything changed. It happened after a gala, one of those exclusive, champagne-soaked events where whispered business deals happened between fake smiles, and the wealthiest people in the room wore their success like armor. Lena had spent the night by Nathaniel's side, playing the role of his assistant, while trying to ignore the way women flocked to him. Their laughter was too sweet, their touches too familiar. By the time they left, she was drained. The car ride back to his penthouse was quiet. The city lights blurred past in streaks of gold and silver. Then, out of nowhere, Nathaniel spoke. "You were incredible tonight." Lena turned, caught off guard. "What?" His gaze was already on her, steady and unreadable. "The way you handled the conversations," he said. kept people engaged, managed the press. You made my life easier." She let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "That's my job." His jaw tightened. "Yes, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't acknowledge it." Something about the way he said it made her pulse quicken. Before she could respond, the car slowed to a stop outside his building. She expected him to say goodnight, to let her go. Instead, he stepped out and held the door open for her. "Come up," he said. She hesitated. "Nathaniel, just for a drink." His voice was softer now. No expectations. Lena swallowed hard and stepped out of the car. Every instinct in Lena's body told her this was dangerous. But the way Nathaniel was looking at her, like she was something he couldn't quite walk away from, made it impossible to say no. She followed him inside. His penthouse was exactly what she expected: sleek, commanding, and effortlessly luxurious. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, dark leather furniture added a quiet sophistication, and the whole space carried an air of control that felt unmistakably his. Lena felt like she had stepped into another world. Nathaniel loosened his tie, poured them both a drink, and handed her a glass before sinking onto the couch beside her. The silence between them was thick, heavy with something unspoken. She took a sip, trying to ignore the weight of his gaze on her. But then, as if he couldn't hold it any longer, he finally spoke. "I don't do this." His voice was low, rough. Lena frowned. "Do what?" His eyes burned into hers. Cross lines. Her breath caught. Neither of them moved, but the air between them shifted. Charged, electric, inevitable. Lena's pulse pounded. "Then maybe we shouldn't," she whispered. Nathaniel exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair. "I know." But he didn't move away, and neither did she. The space between them disappeared, his breath warm against her skin. Her own breath hitched when his fingers brushed lightly against her cheek, tracing a line of fire in their wake. Her eyes fluttered shut as his lips hovered just over hers, so close she could feel the heat of him, the hesitation, the moment before everything changed. And then his phone buzzed. The sharp vibration shattered the moment. Nathaniel cursed under his breath, pulling back abruptly. Lena exhaled, her heart racing, her body frozen in place. He grabbed his phone, his expression darkening as he read the screen. Then, without another word, he stood. His jaw clenched tight. "I have to take this." Lena nodded, forcing herself to breathe as he stepped away. Setting down her glass, she flexed her trembling fingers, as if trying to rid herself of the fire still coursing through her veins. This was dangerous, and if she wasn't careful, she was going to get burned. The next morning, Nathaniel barely looked at her. He was back to being cold, distant. All business. Lena told herself that was for the best, but it didn't stop the ache in her chest. Days passed the same way. The tension between them thickened, pressing against them like a storm waiting to break. They both contended nothing had happened, that there had been no stolen moment, no almost kiss that had left her restless every night since. Until the night, everything came crashing down. It was late. The office had long since emptied, the halls silent except for the faint hum of the city beyond the glass walls. Lena was still there, finishing up reports. She hadn't expected Nathaniel to still be there too, but when she walked into his office, she found him standing by the window, a drink in his hand, shoulders tense. She hesitated. "Nathaniel?" He didn't turn. For a long moment, the only sound was the distant murmur of the city below. Then finally he spoke. "I can't stop thinking about you." Lena's breath caught. Slowly, he turned, his gaze locking onto hers. "I tried to ignore it," he said, voice rough, almost reluctant. "Tried to convince myself this was just a passing distraction." He took a step closer. "But it's not." Her pulse pounded. For weeks, she had forced herself to pretend she didn't feel it too. But standing here, with the city lights casting shadows across his sharp features, she couldn't pretend anymore. She took a shaky breath. "Neither can I." The space between them vanished. His hands found her waist, pulling her against him. His lips crashed onto hers in a kiss that had been weeks, months, in the making. It was fire and desperation, a release of everything they had been holding back. When they finally pulled apart, his forehead rested against hers, his breathing ragged. "This changes everything," he murmured. Lena swallowed hard. "I know." But she didn't care, because for the first time in a long time, something felt right, and she wasn't going to run from it. Not this time. Not when it was him. The days that followed were a blur of stolen moments and unspoken truths. Lena and Nathaniel tried to keep things professional, but it was impossible. The tension between them had shifted, and there was no going back. They had reached the breaking point. And now that they had crossed the line, there was no going back. Their kisses were rushed and desperate between meetings. His fingers brushed against hers when he handed her a file, their gazes locking across conference rooms filled with people who had no idea what was happening between them. But the nights were the worst, because that was when the walls came down. It started with late work sessions at his penthouse, where Lena would sit on his couch with her laptop, pretending not to notice the way Nathaniel watched her from across the room. Then it became dinners, meals he insisted on ordering when he noticed she was too busy to eat, his fingers lingering just a second too long as he handed her a plate. And then, one night, she fell asleep on his couch, exhausted from a relentless day of back-to-back meetings. She woke to the sound of ice clinking in a glass. Her eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the dim glow of the city lights filtering through the windows. Nathaniel was sitting nearby, his tie loosened, his gaze already on her. "You should go home," he said quietly. Lena swallowed, sitting up. "I know," but neither of them moved. And then, he was in front of her. His fingers brushed lightly along the side of her face, hesitant, as if he was fighting something within himself. His voice was barely a whisper. "I can't do this." Lena's heart clenched. "Then don't." But instead of pulling away, he kissed her. And this time, there was no hesitation, no restraint. She wasn't sure who moved first. Only that one moment, she was sitting on the couch, and the next, she was in his lap, his hands gripping her waist as their lips met in a kiss that stole the breath from her lungs. This wasn't rushed or frantic like before. This was different. This was surrender. Her fingers tangled in his hair, his lips tracing a slow, burning path down her neck, and she knew without a doubt. This was the point of no return, and she didn't care. Because nothing had ever felt more right than this. Morning came, but the world hadn't changed. Yet, everything between them had. Lena stirred, still half lost in sleep, feeling the weight of Nathaniel's arm draped over her waist. His breathing was steady. His warmth against her was undeniably familiar. For a fleeting second, she allowed herself to pretend this was normal, that this was just another morning, that there weren't a million reasons why this was a bad idea. Then, reality crashed in. She shifted slightly, and before she could pull away, his grip tightened, as if he could sense her thoughts. "Don't," he murmured against her skin. Her pulse pounded. "Don't what?" "Don't overthink this." Lena exhaled, closing her eyes, but she couldn't help it, because she knew the world wouldn't let them stay in this bubble forever. And she was right. At first, the cracks were small. A lingering look in the office that someone noticed, a whispered conversation in the hallway that raised eyebrows. And then, the rumors started. First, it was murmurs among the staff. Then it spread like wildfire. By the time Nathaniel's board caught wind of it, the damage had already been done. The morning it all exploded. Lena walked into the office and knew immediately something was wrong. Nathaniel stood by his desk, his phone clenched in his hand, his expression unreadable. But she knew, her stomach twisted. "Who?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. He exhaled through his nose. "The board." Lena's chest tightened. "What did they say?" His jaw clenched. "They don't like the optics." Of course they didn't. A billionaire CEO caught in a secret relationship with his assistant? It was the kind of scandal that could shake the foundation of his company. Lena felt something ache deep in her chest. "What do we do?" For the first time since she had met him, Nathaniel hesitated. Then, slowly, he looked at her, and she knew. She knew before he even said it. "We can't keep doing this," he said. Nathaniel's voice was rough, edged with something raw. Lena felt like the air had been knocked from her lungs. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him they could figure this out, but she wasn't naive. She had always known this wouldn't last. She had just never expected it to hurt this much. Her throat tightened as she forced herself to nod. "I understand." Nathaniel's eyes darkened. "Lena?" But she shook her head and stepped back. Because if she let him speak, she would break. And she couldn't afford to break. Not here. Not in front of him. So she turned and walked away. And this time, he let her go. The days that followed were agonizing. She showed up to work, did her job, pretended that his presence didn't still make her pulse race. They both knew things weren't the same. Until the night of the gala. It was the event of the year, filled with Chicago's elite, the kind of people who measured power in stock prices and last names. Lena had no choice but to attend. She spent the night avoiding Nathaniel, pretending she didn't feel his gaze tracking her every move. But then, just as she was about to leave, a hand closed around her wrist. She turned, and there he was. Nathaniel. His tie was loosened, his green eyes darker than she had ever seen them. Her breath caught. "What are you doing?" she whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled her into a secluded corner away from the crowd. The air between them crackled, charged with everything they had been forcing themselves to ignore. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice raw. Lena's heart pounded. "We don't have a choice." His jaw clenched. To hell with choices. And then, before she could say another word, he kissed her. And just like that, everything else fell away. When they finally pulled apart, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers, his breath unsteady. "I don't care about the board," he murmured. "I don't care about the rules." His hands cupped her face, his touch both gentle and firm. "I care about you." Lena's vision blurred. "Tell me I'm not alone in this," he whispered. She exhaled shakily. "You're not." A slow breath left his lips. His grip on her tightened. "Then let's fight," he said. "Together." And for the first time in weeks, Lena let herself hope. Because this wasn't just a fling. This was real. And she wasn't ready to walk away. Not now. Not ever. Thank you for following Lena and Nathaniel's journey, through twists, heartbreak, and the undeniable pull of fate. Love isn't always easy. Sometimes it's messy, complicated, and full of impossible choices. But when it's real, when it's worth fighting for, nothing else matters. We hope this story left you inspired, breathless, and maybe even believing in the magic of unexpected love. Stay tuned for more stories filled with passion, resilience, and unforgettable moments. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep believing, and keep chasing the stories that set your heart on fire.